When visiting a reconstructed longhouse, we are often met with a sense of the uncanny, a feeling of discomfort, of nostalgia. It's like the feeling of trespassing in a decrepit barn or an old abandoned warehouse. The feeling you get leaving an apartment after packing everything into boxes, when all that remains on the walls are hooks and some wire. You get this sense of what was and which ne'er again shall be. There's an unreality to these buildings. There's something that just feels off. The unreality of these reconstructions leads people to a different impression of the longhouses than their historical reality. The issue is that the buildings are empty. Nobody lives here. The buildings do not feel lived in because they are not lived in. They are that empty apartment, the showroom never designed to house people. Even in those reconstructions which are well funded and well maintained, there is still this sense of the uncanny. These places are not lived in. They don't feel like real spaces, they feel like dioramas. I'm not going to criticize these reconstructions for this. Funding is always an issue. As we've seen, some sites have trouble finding the money for basic maintenance. The role of the longhouse also presents a unique problem in this situation. If you were recreating, say, a pioneer cabin, you might only have to recreate the paraphernalia of 3 to 6 people. A full-sized longhouse might house over 100 people. That's a lot of deerskins. Even those sites with enough money to furnish their reconstructions well still give an inaccurate impression. An area that I am prepared to criticize, however, is historical artwork. The budgetary limitations of an artist are obviously not on the same scale of someone doing a physical reconstruction. However good or how detailed this artwork is, they still fail to capture the scale and density of life in a longhouse. They're not cluttered enough, there's not enough things, there's not enough of the stuff of life. People lived here. These were multifunctional buildings: bedroom, living room, kitchen, dining room, workshop, storehouse, all rolled into one. Where's the bedding, the cookware, the tools, the clothing, the playthings, the raw materials, the hundreds of half-finished projects? Where is all the food? Oftentimes, just to show what they are, a reconstruction will have a braid of corn hanging from one of the posts. A well-funded reconstruction might have a dozen or 2 dozen. Artwork often has a row of corn braids hanging from the central rafter. None of this conveys the scale of the originals. When you look up at the ceiling, you shouldn't just see 1 corn braid, or a dozen, or 2 dozen, or 100, or several hundred. There should be thousands and tens of thousands of these corn braids hanging from the ceiling. People would generally have a year's supply of food stockpiled in case the harvests and the hunt failed utterly. A corn braid contains about 30 cobs of corn, which is about a day and a half's worth of calories if you're not too active. Every person who lives in the longhouse would need at least 200 of these to get through a year. Now scale this up to at least 30 people. Then add in the other foods, garlands of smoked venison and fish. Now fill the shelves with pumpkins and baskets of skunk beans, pots of pemmican, tallow, dried berries, nuts, and between all of this, skins stretched and smoking. Moving down, the middle shelf should be filled to the brim with clothes, tools, jewelry, weaponry, and all sorts of raw materials ready to be shaped into something wonderful. Finished furs and leather, spools of braided corn husk ready for weaving into mats. On the lowest shelf there should be mats of corn husk or of bark covering the logs, and over these bedding of soft deerskin and blankets of rabbit. Between each post and the wall dividing up the sleeping quarters there should be a curtain, either of deerskin or else of woven cedar bark, or else a dividing wall of ash wattle. There should be curtains in the front that could be drawn for privacy. In wintertime, thick furs should be stapled to the outside wall. Underneath all the shelves there should be cookware, a day's worth of firewood, pits for cold storage. Across the floor should stretch mats of corn husk to keep the dust down, to keep your feet off the cold of the ground in winter. The inside of the elm bark walls should be painted. The events of the year, the exploits of individuals, mythological scenes and general patterns. The central posts should be carved in kind. These days, the reconstructed longhouses are empty and uncanny, but one should not make the mistake of thinking they were always this way. Once upon a time, they were vibrant places.